Normally when you see me up here, I'm normally in a play, a drama, or a skit. Tonight, you do not get the actress. Tonight, you get the real me, the authentic me. You get my heart, and you get my soul. Now, I have to be honest with you and tell you, I'm far more comfortable in the actress role. This makes me nervous. Not my comfort zone. When I was in high school, I performed in the plays, and there was the absolute best memories of my high school journey. However, when it came to speech class, and I had to give my first speech, I was petrified. My mom taught me what some did back then: just envision them in their underwear. The good news is, you all look fabulous. Well, thank you for laughing, because now we're going to have an uncomfortable conversation. However, change can happen in uncomfortable conversations. Have you ever felt like your character was defined by a hurt, a trauma from your past, or brokenness? Is it possible to become whole again after brokenness? I'm here to tell you it is. Many years ago, I was broken, and I made the choice to go on the journey to become whole again. I made the choice to journey towards kintsugi. If you're here at our church last week, you heard Phil give us a great introduction into what kintsugi is. Tonight, I'm here as the real-life version. Let's go back to kintsugi. So kintsugi is a Japanese art form where you take broken pottery and you put it back together piece by piece with lacquered silver, platinum, or gold. It comes with the belief that when something's been broken, it can be repaired and become stronger and more beautiful. The cracks are meant to be highlighted, not hidden. A means to be whole again and embrace our imperfections. What created my brokenness? I want to share a piece of paper with you. And this piece of paper is 40 years old. And yes, paper does yellow after 40 years. I wrote this as a one-page journal when I had just turned 13. I wrote on one side, I flipped it over, I wrote on the back, and I wrote in the corner, a part of me I'll never forget. That part of me I'll never forget is that I was sexually abused by my stepfather for 6 years as a child, from age 6 to age 12. When I wrote this, it was a small release of the anger that I had towards my stepfather and the anger that I had towards children being abused all over the world. I titled it, I'll Always Hate Him. When I wrote this, I also had feelings of deep shame, humiliation, low self-worth, and low self-esteem. Because of those feelings, I folded it up, I put it away, and I didn't do anything with it until recently, but I saved it. Little did I know I saved it for a purpose. Many of you know I'm a hairstylist by trade. I see clients every 4, 6, 8 weeks. You can develop a close relationship when you see clients that often. One of those special clients that came in, she had a sweet smile and a great personality. However, I knew she had struggled with some depression and PTSD. I didn't know why. One day she shared with me, she too had been abused. I shared my story. We talked for a bit. She left for her appointment. When she came back the next time, she asked me, Cathy, did you suffer depression? I paused. I had depressed days, and I had a tremendous amount of shame. However, I did not. What about PTSD, she asked. I had angst, I had worry, I had humiliation, yet I did not. Well, you medicated, right? She asked. No. I know it's beneficial for some. I was broken. I had a journey to heal. But I didn't. She looked me in the eye. You need to write a book, girlfriend. I laughed it off too. I couldn't see the value that day, but I left. And it sat on me in the days to come, and I reflected. Why do some people go through traumas and go on to live fairly successful lives? And why do others suffer more? One person no better than another. What did I do? What did I do on my journey? I went into deep introspection. The gift in that place is you can develop a much closer relationship with God. And that place can be honest and it can be powerful. So I started writing. I took notes on index cards. I wrote down the attributes I applied, books I loved, quotes that empowered me, and scripture I drew strength from. Then I was invited to United Way Women's Leadership Network talk by a dear friend. It was to benefit a charity. Brooke Axtell was speaking. She was sharing her story of survival, how she unfortunately became a victim of human trafficking by a family nanny. Then later, she became a victim of domestic violence by a boyfriend. You see, when we suffer from one form of abuse, we are far more likely to suffer another, which is why it is so critical to release the shame that we carry deep down inside. I heard every word of her message, but that night, I got my own message. You are here tonight for a purpose. That purpose is time to share your story. Write the book. So I went home, and in the days to come, I started to write. Well, that writing came with apprehension, a lot of apprehension. When I started writing that story, less than 10 people knew my story. I put this into a book. The world will know my story. I went back into deep introspection. Why me? Why now? I'm not a saint. I'm imperfect. I'm flawed. I'm scared. My message back: you're enough. You got a story that needs to be told. So I continued writing. When I wrote my story, all I knew is it was a purpose. When I finished my book, I could explain why the attributes I applied brought me to kintsugi and reduced my risk for depression, anxiety, and PTSD. Let me share. Sorry. These are listed from what was the easiest for me to what was the hardest. I kept my good perspective. I expanded and continued my resilience. I grew my gratitude. I added self-compassion, which I have to add is incredibly hard when you have a tremendous amount of shame. I found my faith, and I allowed forgiveness. The last two were by far the hardest. When you lay in bed at night as a child and pray for this travesty against you to end and it doesn't, you ask, how could a God exist? How could a God exist and not answer my prayers for 6 years? How could a God exist and let this happen to innocent children? Or, if he does exist, does he think I'm bad too and I deserve this? Because that is what I believed about myself. So one can see when you ask questions like this, it is not a quick trip to faith. However, it was a journey I chose to embark on. I want to share a story with you that I related to while I was on that journey. I heard the story of David and Goliath when I was a child. Many of you know it. David was the very small Jewish shepherd who was about to embark on a fight with a very large Philistine giant named Goliath. Visually, this was no match. David went into the fight believing his higher power was with him, and he simply had a sling and a stone. He defeated the giant. I could relate to this. As a very young child, I saw myself as David, the definite underdog. The giant was my stepfather. The sling was my fight to survive. The stone was my good perspective that I carried and held on to try to find a break away from the pain. Then when I went into adulthood, I looked at it slightly differently. I still saw myself as David, the underdog. Giant was my feelings of deep shame, humiliation, low self-worth, and low self-esteem. My sling was my fight to survive, but the perseverance to thrive. My stone were the 6 attributes that I applied. The giant fell. My faith journey led me to a beautiful place. It took me to a place of love, compassion, and strength. And it was layers. Talking to people who had strong faith, people who had no faith, books, scripture. I was blessed to go on an Emmaus walk thanks to a dear friend. I was glad I got there. The next big gift with my faith was forgiveness. I could then start to consider the possibility of forgiveness, which felt impossible. How do you forgive someone who cracked and broke you? What did my stepfather do to deserve my forgiveness? There's a saying I love. Holding on to anger and resentment is like drinking poison but expecting the other person to die. Now think about that. We think it hurts them. However, when we don't let go and we carry that, it allows the hurt, the trauma, the brokenness to have power over us. When we truly let go of our anger, our hate, and our resentment, it gives us our power back. And that is the gift of forgiveness. When I let go of forgiveness and I allowed it, I then could finally put together the last piece that allowed me to become kintsugi and be whole again. And that was so critical. It's critical for all of us to truly reach our best potentials and find joy, value, and worth. Now, before we go, I want to raise your awareness. Oh, too far. Go back. There we go. 10 seconds. 10 seconds. Every 10 seconds in the United States, one child has been abused and neglected. Every 10 seconds in the United States. That means 6 children every minute. That means from the time you walked in this door for this service and the time you walk back out, that's 360 children will have been abused. Are you comfortable with those numbers? I am not. Nor do I believe God is either. Now I'm going to ask you a favor and I'm going to give you some exercise. If you have a son, would you please stand up? One parent, unless you have more than one son, both parents can stand up. If you have a son, please stand up. I want you to look around the room and I want you to look at everyone standing. 1 out of 6. 1 out of 6 boys before the age of 18 will be sexually abused in some form. Thank you. You can sit down. Now, I'm going to ask you to do the same if you have a daughter. If you have a daughter, please stand up. One parent, unless you have more than one daughter. Please stand up. If you have more than $2, you can raise your hand. Stay standing. Look around the room. 1 out of 4. 1 out of 4 girls will be sexually abused before the age of 18 in some way or shape or form. Thank you. You can sit down. This does not include verbal, nor does this include catcalls. Again, I ask, are you comfortable with these numbers? I am not. Nor do I believe this is what God intended. 48 million. There's 48 million survivors of sexual abuse just in the United States. 85% never report. What are our real numbers? Back. One more. Oh, come on, too fast. Can you say that number?
It's big.
It's big. It's real big. $750 billion. This is the cost of sexual violence in the United States. This is the societal and the socioeconomic impact. This number actually was taken from 2008. We don't have an updated number. How do we talk about boosting our economy and not discuss that number? So what can we do? I believe every person in this room can do something starting today to start to reduce and eliminate our statistics. First, if you are a survivor, use your voice. If you haven't shared, find someone to share, a counselor, someone. Step into healing if you haven't. Healing is critical for all of us to reach our best selves and truly have that joy, value, and worth. If someone shares with you their story, be that safe place. Believe. Be sensitive to the vulnerability that they just shared with you. Are you a parent or a grandparent? We absolutely have to teach our children they have boundaries with their bodies. This is absolutely necessary to prevent and lower their vulnerability. Yes, we have to start this conversation at a young age and continue it as the vulnerabilities increase. Age appropriate, but necessary. Sometimes we say or do things that unintentionally make our children vulnerable. It is not our intent, but unfortunately it can be the byproduct of our words or our actions. I share in my book actions that you can take and say and the conversations that you need to have to reduce these vulnerabilities. This is absolutely necessary for us to make an impact. Tom read Ecclesiastes 3:11. He makes everything beautiful in time. It took me 40 years to take this one-page journal and turn it into a book. Yet, it was time. It's time to break the silence. It's time for uncomfortable conversations. It's time for us to start reducing and eliminating the statistics. It's time to go from broken to beautifully whole. The title of my book is Broken to Beautifully Whole. My book will be available on Amazon for pre-sales the end of this month, and it'll launch July 14th. I'll be out in the fellowship hall with cards if you would like more information. Tonight, I want to thank you for your time. God bless you, and God bless our children. Thank you.